Jamie and Jeremy from Guildbrook Farm, and welcome to the dirt. And today we're going to talk about why we are going back on grid.
Welcome to the dirt, where we talk a little bit about why we do what we do, why we think what we think. And today we're going to talk about going back on grid. Alright, I'm going to leave 6 inches sticking up, so once we have the slab poured and everything, that'll go up into the basement slab. Toasty. See, I do have an angle grinder. And that's that. All right, there. Now we have a door opening.
So right now we're digging the French drain for our DIY ICF house. And I use DIY loosely because we are getting a couple subcontractors up here to help us with the shell, but we're doing as much as we can ourselves. And those of you guys who have been following along know that we have a hard time getting subs up here, and we had no luck getting a general, so we are general contracting this house ourselves. And we're just learning as we go. But one of the issues with getting the subs up here, when we first started looking for subs, is we mentioned the word off-grid, where we have an off-grid house that we're building. And let me just tell you that that is an immediate turnoff for getting any kind of subcontractors up here. Because they don't want to work on a generator. And so we're faced with the dilemma of, do we want to fall on our own swords and try and build absolutely everything ourselves when we would be better off getting an expert up here to help us with certain areas of the house build, just for the sake of remaining off grid? Or are we going to go ahead and hook up to the grid so that we can get the subs out here to help us do the work that we need done?
So that brings us to that. A lot of people in the comments have been saying, you're not off grid because there's power right there. There's a power pole with a transformer. And you're right, it's been there for 25 years. So is that temporary power pole. At one point, many years ago, somebody who owned this property had animals up here and had an electric fence run. But that's the only thing that had ever been hooked up to. If you recall, back when we started our channel, it was called Guildbrook Farm Simple Sustainable Living. And it was all about homesteading, learning homesteading skills, canning, preserving, prepping, and we talked about someday wanting to buy a piece of property, develop our own homestead outside of the suburbs, having off-grid capability, doing all these kinds of things. We never really intended to buy an off-grid property or a property that didn't have any power. We actually were looking for a place that already had a house and maybe some outbuildings. We just couldn't find that. So what we ended up with was this place with a little trailer on it that was completely off the grid. That doesn't mean that there's not grid power here. And so that's one of the reasons that we did buy it, and that's also why we went ahead and invested in our solar system. As I said, we always wanted to have off-grid capability. This particular scenario just put us to where we bought our solar system first, and now we have it. So the plan is to connect to the grid, to connect the house to the grid, because it's like 125 feet away from where we're building the house. Why would we not do that? And we'll use that basically as what I call electrical insurance to back up our solar, charge the batteries at night. And this power does go out quite a bit up here in the mountain. We've had neighbors talk about the power going out and this and that, and we never noticed because we're not hooked to it. We have our own power system. So that'll be good. We'll have both. We'll have grid, and we'll run primarily off our solar, and that also gives us the option to put in a regular heat pump / HVAC unit, which was one thing that we didn't really consider when we moved here, was the effect of the humidity, and having a good air conditioning system, humidity control system, is going to be very, very important. So grid power allows us to use a traditional vent, ducted system. We originally talked about doing mini splits, but once we decided that we're going to hook up to the grid, we don't necessarily have to do mini splits. Even though they are a little bit more efficient, they're also quite a bit more expensive in our particular scenario. So those are all things that we've been talking about, thinking about, and yeah, we're going back on the grid.
I read a book recently called The Last American Man. It's a biography on Eustace Conway. And here you have a man, Eustace Conway. He lives not too far from us. He has a 1,000-acre preserve called Turtle Island Preserve, where he trains people to live Native American, pioneer, old-timey lifestyle. But he also has interns that live and work there for a year or so, and they live in a very extreme environment. And if they don't meet Eustace's idea of extremism, then they leave the camp, and it's pretty extreme. I mean, we're talking like no heat in the winter, bathing in the creeks. They have to forage 100% for their own food. That includes going to garbage cans behind grocery stores and getting what's left over and thrown out. But here you have a man that's has a willing group of people who are willing to learn his lifestyle, but because they don't meet his criteria or his expectations, they don't stay in the camp. And I find that really sad, because there are a lot of people that want to live this lifestyle, but they just can't do it to the extent of extremism. And I think that turns a lot of people off. But I really do hope that, we set an example for anybody who's wanting to live off-grid or be off-grid or have off-grid capabilities or homestead, that you realize, though, that it doesn't have to be all one way or all another way. We're trying to make do in a modern world. We're trying to live effectively and efficiently in a modern world, and there is a way of doing that without having to completely give up everything and live in a cave. So why have an HVAC system anyway? Why not just tough it out? Put up with the summers and the heat and whatnot, and use the wood stove in the winter. Well, I think one of the biggest things, and we've mentioned this several times before, that we underestimated in living remotely in the mountains in North Carolina is the humidity. And we will have an entire summer and most of the fall and spring where we'll have the humidity up around 90%. And when you have humidity that high, what you end up getting is a lot of mildew and mold. And we have a container that we have all of our stuff in. We didn't take very many things with us when we moved from our last home, but the few things that we did take are pretty much ruined at this point, just because of the mildew and the mold that has been growing from the humidity, because there's no way of dehumidifying that space, at least not without having a dehumidifier cord running there and dehumidifier running all the time. And so when we are building this house, which is going to be our retirement home, and we're putting in or building furniture and stuff for our house, we don't want that stuff to get ruined. And we're talking like mattresses, getting mold and mildew on them. We're talking about carpets and couches, and we have computer equipment that should not be getting damp. And these are things that we are investing our time and our money into, and we don't want them to get ruined. And if you live completely extremely and you are stuffing a mattress with straw every year, and you don't have to worry about mold, that's one thing. But we're not that extreme, and we're not going to do that where all of our items that we're making and building and buying are that disposable. And so that is why we need an HVAC system, or mostly for the humidity, to dehumidify the air. So I think something that is really overlooked in a lot of off-grid, homesteading, self-sufficient, self-sustainable channels, blogs, books, is not only the ability to grow your own food, to do DIY projects, to learn how to weave baskets, to hunt for your own food, but it's also how to live in the modern world. And not only live in the modern world, but to do it from a cost-effective point of view. You know, for us, it's not cost-effective to build an entire solar array that covers the entire south ridge of our hill in order to run an HVAC system. It's also not effective for us to live so primitively that we don't need to have an HVAC system where we're living with straw mattresses and disposable furniture that we can just replace whenever we want. There's a balance there. There's a balance with keeping your foot in both worlds, and that's something that Jeremy had said last night. You have to be able to function in the modern world, but you also should know the skills so that should something happen, or should you need to rely on those skills, that you have them available. So yeah, extremism. It's fun, it's entertaining, it's sexy. People love to watch it on TV, but it's not always practical. And so we are going to be hooking back up to the grid because it just makes sense from a financial standpoint, and from the standpoint of it's available, and it's going to make our lives a whole lot easier. And we will still have the solar panels as a backup for when the grid does go down. We'll have the generator as a backup to that. And so when we do switch over to being on grid, or mostly on grid, we're going to be changing our channel name over to Self-Sustainable Living again, because we try to be as truthful as we can with our audience. But I thought it was really important that we conveyed the reason why we are going back on grid, and the reason why we went off grid in the first place, if you missed that, which was just circumstance. It wasn't intentional. So I'm going to finish digging this ditch, and we're going to get back to you with some videos as soon as our ICF blocks come in, and we look forward to hearing from you. And if you guys have any opinions as to the whole off-grid thing, the living in a modern world, and also trying to be more self-sufficient, I'd love to hear your comments down below. We look forward to reading them. Thanks. We'll see you in the next video.